Hi, thank you for tuning in on Little Stories in Big China. My name is Hoyin Soy, and I will be your host today. The story that I'm sharing today is one that belongs to someone truly special to me, my mother. For this episode, I had asked her to share her story of dropping out of school at 17 and going to Shenzhen to work. At first, she was quite confused and reluctant to share the story. Perhaps it was part of her childhood that she wasn't proud of, or didn't want to recall. However, after my constant requests and pleadings, she finally agreed to share. My mother was born on July 7th, 1973, in Jiangxi Province, China. Jiangxi Province is located in southern China, just west of the Yangtze River. Surrounded by misty mountains and freshwater lakes, Jiangxi Province was ideal for agricultural growth. In fact, Jiangxi Province was one of the nation's most affluent regions. However, my mother lived far from Jiangxi's city center. She lived in a small rural village in Pingxiang, the westernmost region of Jiangxi Province. The village was extremely agricultural dependent and had a population of 400. Since Pingxiang is located at the westernmost border of Jiangxi away from the city central, the economy and commerce wasn't great. People that lived at the borders did not have access to rich resources, such as newly renovated schools or public transportations. To go to school, my mother and her 4 siblings would have to walk 6 miles of ragged mountain road each day. Although going to school was extremely hard, my mother persevered through this tough situation. Everything was going well until senior year. After I finished high school, the grades weren't very good. To graduate, I had to retake 12th grade and obtain passing grades. However, growing up in a family of 5, our family was struggling. Both my parents took multiple jobs to support the family, and it still wasn't enough. Seeing how much my family was struggling, I decided not to repeat 12th grade, but instead attempt to find a job to alleviate some of my family's burden. At the end of each year, Chinese school have a cumulative final exam to decide whether or not you had to retake the grade. During my mom's senior year, her family faced many challenges. That year, the rice, potato, and cabbages were not growing very well, resulting in a low harvest. Without the money to purchase quality farm supplies, my grandparents didn't make enough money to support my mom for another year of school, considering that they still have to support 2 more kids through high school. The average annual income of my grandparents that year was around 10,000 RMB, or $1,400. Seeing how much the family was struggling, my mom dropped out of school and looked for many summer jobs. Only 10% of the kids in rural China continued their education after senior high, compared to the 70% of their peers in the city. Due to poor family conditions, kids in rural parts of China, which make up roughly 30% of the population, are left uneducated. At that time, I took on many summer jobs, such as selling fruits, ice cream, and working in local groceries. That summer, I made 400 RMB, which is $50 in total. She woke up at 8 a.m. every morning to go to work. After a whole summer of working tirelessly for 7 hours a day, she finally made some money. She made $50 in 2 months and gave half the money to my grandparents while saving up some for herself. After saving up 400 RMB, I wanted to leave my hometown. I wanted to go to Shenzhen because I had heard that the economy there was great. Shenzhen was near Hong Kong, and it was a very technologically advanced city. There were a lot of people in Shenzhen, and I thought that it would be easy to get a job. At that time, I was pretty innocent. I wasn't mature enough to understand how harsh the reality was, since I was only 17 years old. In the 1980s, Shenzhen was the largest economy in southern China. In the 80s, Shenzhen was one of the few newly established special economic zones in China. Under the SEZ plan, Shenzhen was under great industrialization. The construction of factories and buildings lured many manufacturers into the city. Shenzhen became a center for exported and assembled goods. With the newly established factories, Shenzhen became southern China's center of commerce, thus luring many unemployed individuals to go to Shenzhen to seek jobs. I've never been to a big city before, and struggled to integrate into the city life. I didn't understand how the city worked because I grew up in a farm my whole life. I used part of the 400 RMB to buy a train ticket to Shenzhen. I bought the cheapest tickets available and spent a whole night on the train. I was young, but I was determined. As soon as I got to Shenzhen, I tried to find a job. However, it wasn't as easy as I thought it would be. I struggled to find a job because my education was subpar. I didn't speak Cantonese or English, and I didn't know a thing about computers. At that time, computers was a new technology. Upon hearing my mother's decision of leaving to Shenzhen, my grandparents were very reluctant. They proposed that she remain in Pingxiang and help with the farm. However, my mom didn't want to continue the farmer life. She wanted to experience the wonders of the city and find a job that could support the family. After 3 weeks of pleading and begging, my grandparents finally agreed to let her go, as they had no chance in stopping her. By the 1980s, Shenzhen's population doubled. From 9,000 people in 1970, Shenzhen's population grew to 22,000 in the 1980s, mainly due to the industrialization under the SEZ program. Tens of thousands of people came to Shenzhen in hopes of finding a job, yet most of them left the city with their hopes and dreams shattered. With thousands of jobless immigrants roaming the streets, Shenzhen was a mess during the 1980s. The unemployment rate of Shenzhen was 5% that year. Because I had to feed myself and find a place to live, my money was slowly getting used up. To save up money, I bought a little towel and decided to sleep on the benches and in parks. Although it was very cold, I had no other choice. I didn't want to go back and disappoint my family. Living conditions at that time were not great. My mother slept in public parks along with hundreds of other immigrants who failed to find a job. Since it was only summer, the weather was quite warm, although it got quite chilly in the night. Mosquito populations reached its peak during summer, and my mom woke up to tens of mosquito bites every morning. Although she thought about returning to Pingxiang multiple times, she forced herself not to. She told herself that if she went back, the summer's work would go to waste, and she would end up exactly where she started. Weeks passed and I still couldn't find a job. I looked for jobs in many places, but they didn't accept me. The main reason was because I was underage. So, I used someone else's ID and found a job in a clothing factory. I went through a 10-day training program and passed the factory exam. I worked at that factory for 2 years. I was very lucky at that time, because the Chinese government did not link IDs online, or else I would have never been accepted.
了2年，那个时候中国的身份证呢都没有联网的。
In need of money to buy food and water, my mom looked for jobs in local supermarkets. Seeing that she has been roaming around the streets for weeks, an old shopkeeper asked my mom to come over for lunch. That afternoon, she walked into the store and had lunch with the shopkeeper. Out of curiosity, the shop owner asked what a young 17-year-old was doing in the streets, and my mom told her the full story. The shop owner offered my mom to use her 20-year-old daughter's fake ID to find a job. With the fake ID in hand, my mom applied to work at a threading company, where she would have to go to work from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Although the work was tedious, it was her only option because she wasn't able to do the hard labor construction work. At the factory, my mom would get paid 1,000 RMB, which is roughly $140 per month. Although it wasn't much, it was still significantly more than the $16 her family would give her back in Pingxiang. She worked there for 2 years and saved up quite a bit of money.
然后2年之后呢，我就攒了一点钱呢。
2 years later, I saved up some money.
我把1半的钱寄回家了，
I gave half of the
1半的
money
钱就
to
自
my
己攒
family
下了。
and kept the other half to
我就
myself.
觉得
I
在
wanted to
工厂
leave the
打工一
factory
辈子就
because
没什么
I
出
didn't want to
息啊。
stay there my whole life.
然后
I
我又
wanted to use the money I saved
打
up
算
to
去
go to
北京
Beijing
学习。
and continue my education.
因为北京是一个
Thus,
比较有
I
文
bought a
化
train
的城
ticket.
市。然后
In
我就打
Beijing,
算
I enrolled
去
in
北
a
京。
school.
然后就
However,
带着
to
剩
pay
下
for
的
my
那些
tuitions,
钱，就
I
来
had
到
to
北
find
京
many
了。
jobs.
来到北京
Normally,
呢，就一
I would
边
go to school in
打
the
工
morning
一边上
and work
学。
after school has ended.
这样慢慢的呢，就认识了一些
I met many people in
在
Beijing
做生意的方
and
面
learned a
呢，
lot about
也有了
business
一
and
些
trading.
经验。然后又
2
过了
years later,
2年之后，
I used the money I have saved
又
up
挣了一
to
点
start a
钱，
small clothing
我
shop.
就开了自己的小
After
店
earning a decent amount of
卖
money
衣
from my
服呀
clothing shop,
啊，
I
然
started a
后
small media company
这样
with
慢
a
慢
couple of my
的就
friends.
又挣了一点钱，然后认识了一些朋友，然后就慢慢的开了一家那个自己的公司，媒体公司。
Through her hard work and undying ambition to succeed and provide for her family, my mother successfully became the first businesswoman in her family. She finally completed the education she so much desired. Having such a strong woman in my life, I reflect in gratitude the impacts that she had in my life. Over the years, my mother has taught me so much about life, and I thank her for all that she has given to me. She has taught me to love learning and to be the change I want to be. She has taught me that life isn't easy and that I'm not always going to win. She has taught me to have faith and never give up hope in the midst of dark days, and that there is no limit to passion and ambition. I hope that today's episode allowed you guys to catch a glimpse of the harsh lives of immigrant workers. I hope that today's episode has inspired all of you, just like how it inspired me. I hope that we all take the time to sit down with our loved ones and listen to their stories of who they are on the inside. Perhaps you will learn something that you have never realized before. Perhaps you too will learn to be grateful to the ones that care about you the most.